Hi, guys. This week's topic is on spirituality. So let's dive into a little bit around this topic. This is definitely a topical overview. There is an incredible amount of depth for you to be exploring and experimenting and identifying what is true in your view or in your eyes. But let's talk a little bit about what we can say around the concept of spirituality. First, we know that people who are spiritual just view life differently. They have a sense of purpose. They see themselves connected to a broader story. And because of that, they just enjoy life in a different way. So they go through life enjoying a sense of meaning. They have a broader perspective of what each of the events that you face and the challenges that you deal with and the victories that you get to celebrate. You see them all as part of a broader narrative or part of a broader plan. People who are spiritual are not challenged as deeply by crisis. They're not overwhelmed and not necessarily defeated by a crisis. That we can see that as a terrible event, a big setback, a serious loss, depending on whatever that crisis may have been. But it's also not the end of anyone's story, and it's not the definition of who you are. We also know that people who are spiritual heal more quickly and actually heal more completely. People search for answers internally more than they do externally. And that means essentially that when faced with challenges, you're more likely to reflect. You're internally searching for meaning and explanation and purpose and understanding instead of looking for explanations or what often comes across more as finding people or events or reasons to blame when we look to external sources, when we look to other people, when we look to others for answers. Oftentimes that can become actually more challenging to be able to deal with that situation in a healthy way. So when we're searching for answers internally, we're more likely to come to a sense of inner peace, of acceptance. It's true that our choices can actually become part of our physiology. Your faith does impact how your body reacts to stress and to illness and to disease. What you believe about your life, what you value in your life, and what the value and the motivations of the people around you, when those are shaped by a broader sense of purpose and the concept of a higher power and spirituality, those things just shape how we interpret every single minute, every word that's been said to us, every anticipated event, whether they end up happening or not. They all profoundly impact our sense of stress, or whether we feel whether we feel overall at peace. So individuals who have a sense of spirituality, often their bodies respond differently day in and day out because of how they're viewing the interactions and even the things that they just anticipate within life, whether they're anticipating things to be generally bad or whether they're anticipating things to be generally good. When we talk about spiritual health, a strong component of that is the ability to develop a sense of meaning and purpose. And oftentimes, at least within my Christian worldview, I think that that can be articulated in that everything really happens for a reason. I believe God understands a much broader plan and has a much vastly larger view of what is the grand scheme, if that's the language that you like to use. I have an aunt and uncle who always say that God brings beauty out of ashes, and I think that that's another way of saying, like, things happen for a reason. There's a purpose, and even the bad things. Like I can't understand personally why bad things happen. I don't see the justification for that pain, but I do believe that God has a bigger plan, and that I and that I can't see all of it. So having some sense of meaning and purpose is a big component of spiritual health. That relates into your belief in a higher power, as God is in control. So if we truly believe that God is in control, why worry about some of those challenges and issues and problems that we are facing or that we're just imagining? Those are the ones that I think have such a profound impact on how we view and see our life, and I don't know why we worry about them so much. If we really believe God's in control, why worry about things that haven't even happened yet, that we're just afraid may happen? My grandparents, my grandma in particular, always, always said, let go, let go, let God. That was her mantra in a lot of ways. So I think that's that, recognizing God's in control, and you just need to let go at times of your worries and of the pain and of the anxiety and of the fears that we carry. Connectedness is a big component that fits in with spiritual health, and this just means that by this, what I mean is when we are connecting, when we have faith in a higher power and we find others who share that belief system, like when we go to church, when we practice in those in services, when we're with other people that have the same belief and faith and knowledge of God, that we connect with them in a way that's more than just superficial, that it's much deeper than that. Spiritual health also includes the ability for compassion, and that means both forgiveness and altruism. Forgiveness, we'll talk about both of these a little bit. Altruism is represented by acts of kindness. By forgiveness, I think a really, really important component of this is I feel like we're all pretty good at forgiving other people. We can recognize in other people the stresses and strains of an individual incident or situation. We can see the history of all the good events and all of the good interactions that they've had, and we can forgive when there's been one bad incident or when there's been one bad challenge or behavior, whatever it may be. But we never seem to be as good about doing that for ourselves. And I think compassion and forgiveness definitely need to be extended to ourselves as well. So that participation in religious and spiritual activities just brings you back into connection with the broader community. And I think community is so important within our lives. It just gives you a support system so that when you are facing challenges, you feel like you have others there to help and support and encourage you. As we talk a little bit more deeply about forgiveness, it's helpful to hear and understand that forgiveness is a skill, and it can be learned, it can be improved. Wherever your ability or experiences are at with forgiveness at this point doesn't mean that that's the limit of where you're at. You can grow in that ability, and growth within that ability, I think, is a huge marker of your relationship with Christ and with God. But I also don't want you to be misled by forgiveness. There's a number of different things where we sometimes presume that forgiveness means these different items, and this is not what forgiveness means. Forgiveness is not just pretending that everything is fine and brushing it over, and in popular culture where we often talk about everything being the falsity of everything being rainbows and butterflies. That's not what forgiveness means. That also doesn't mean that you're just stuffing away angry or hurt feelings, that your emotions and your responses are real and valid and important. Forgiving somebody doesn't mean that those emotions and that those feelings go away. It also doesn't mean that you're condoning an unjust behavior. Just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean that you accept or that you are condoning what they did. You're not in any way saying that what somebody did to you or said to you, or how they behaved or failed to do to you, whatever the hurt was, whatever the incident was. It's not that you're saying, yeah, you were right in what you did. You're saying, I forgive you for what you did. It's very, very different. It's not condoning the behavior. Also, when we talk about forgiveness, it doesn't mean that you have to reconcile or make contact with the offender. It could be very healthy and very helpful for you to be discussing and sharing with the other person, hey, this happened. This is how it made me feel. This is what the outcome of that was, but I forgive you. That can be very, very helpful and very, very healthy. But in other times, it may not be. It may not be the right way. You can forgive someone in your heart. You don't have to tell that other person. You can still experience the benefits of the release of and the calm, um, and the ability to move on from that moment and that situation and that stress without having to talk it over or without having to say to the other person that you forgive them. You can forgive them in your heart. Forgiveness also doesn't mean that you forget the situation. To forgive does not mean that you've forgotten. A good way I think of thinking about forgiveness is recognizing that forgiveness is giving the debt over to God and just not holding on to it yourself, that you're not trapped. Your thoughts aren't trapped. Your emotions aren't trapped back at the event or the incident or the pain. But instead, you're saying, I have forgiven this other person as God has forgiven our sins. And I am ready to move on. I will let God deal with everything that comes hereafter. It's not mine to carry anymore. I give that over to God. And I think that's a very healthy way for us to think about what forgiveness is. Altruism, we've already mentioned, was this act of giving or helping others. The concept maybe of random acts of kindness, that you're doing something for others without any expectation of getting anything back on your own. That can come in the form of all kinds of forms, but some of them may include the idea of gifts or community service. The idea of paying it forward, I think, is a very good example within popular culture of what altruism is. But those random acts of kindness don't have to be grand or large. It's oftentimes just offering support for another person, whether that's via a thoughtful text message, whether it's offering a hug, whether it's a phone call, whatever it may be. Altruism can take either grand forms or very small forms, but all of them can be very impactful. And we know kindness has really definitely been shown to be contagious. I have this quote here by Sir John Templeton, who said, know that there is no power in the universe greater than love, and no act more important than loving. Agape is the unselfish love that gives of itself and expects nothing in return. Now, out of that quote, the word that may stand out to you is agape. That's actually a Greek word for love. The Greeks actually had numerous variations of what we translate into the single word of love. So they had lots of different ways of expressing the forms of love or the types of love. And agape is the type of love or the form of love that really is that unselfish love that's not expecting anything back. As we continue to think around spirituality, prayer is an important component, I think, in keeping us constantly connected with God, in keeping alive a conversation and keeping that repeated connection intentional within our lives and and it shapes our perspective of what's happening. So we found prayer really helps people cope with daily stresses. Prayer actually can help people heal from illness and addiction. People that pray have been shown to have lower stress hormone levels going into surgery. And it's also been shown to lower the intensity of pain and stress after dramatic life events, from surgery to other forms of just pain and suffering that we all experience within our lives. So if you think about what is the purpose of prayer, or at least the way I would describe the purpose of prayer, I think prayer is like giving is a way to express that you are giving your life and your worries and your debts, those debts of anxiety, those debts of fear, all of those things, you're giving them over to God, that you are expressing. It may be a silent expression just within your own mind, or it may be something that you speak out loud, but that you're expressing this desire to stay connected to God, that you're expressing your release of control, and the expectation of things happening your way, that you are relinquishing the need to carry on all of these worries and pains. If you think about what Jesus told us about God when he was giving his Sermon on the Mount, he included within that the statement, God, not my will be done, but your will be done. And I think that's a good paraphrase of what prayer offers for us. It gives us the chance to release that and to allow God to be in control of those worries, to be in control of those debts, to be in control. Because I think God sees by far, I know God sees by far the greater picture than I ever even can. So, as that leads us into a little bit this concept around philosophy. So, philosophy obviously can take so many dynamic turns. There's such a huge and wide and broad spectrum of what your philosophy may look like, and what philosophy certainly can entail. So these two viewpoints that you see here are just expressing two singular viewpoints, but they're here to have you try to further consider where you currently fit. What is your current philosophy? And it's something that can change and grow and morph and expand. But I have two statements here, two basic philosophies here. One, that truth is relative, and it's really dependent upon individual experiences. It's dependent upon society. It is something that changes. The other statement here is that truth is universal, and there is a source of ultimate truth. And again, you don't need to be all one or all the other, but these two statements are here to have you think about, which side do you fit more towards? Which side sounds more correct to you? I believe there is a universal source of truth. I believe God is that universal source of truth. I think the Bible exists to introduce us to God. I think we perceive and understand some of the vastness of truth, but by no means do we understand all of the complexity and interconnection that God intentionally created. I think the Bible tries to help us understand the level of love that God has for us, and that he really wants us to work in love with and for each other because of our interdependence and because of the connection to each other that he intentionally built into our entire existence. So for me, there is a universal truth, and I will never understand all of it. There's an unchanging truth. And while it seems like, as my current understanding shifts on different areas, it can seem sometimes like that truth has shifted. It's more that just I've seen a different perspective, or I've gained a little bit more understanding, but I don't understand the entire vastness and complexity that God has the ability to, and my mortal brain never, ever will. So I mentioned the Bible already, and when we talk about reading the Bible, there can be a lot of skeptics around what you're seeing in the Bible. And a common question can be, can we trust that what we have today is accurate and complete? And part of that is faith, for sure. But I think that that's definitely been reinforced over and over and over again as you look at some of the scientific ways that we look into the past. So if you look at archaeological evidence, repeatedly archaeology is validating and reinforcing, not validating, rather reinforcing that what you see and what you hear and what you read from the Bible did happen. The events that they depict and the experiences that were there, as much as archaeology can validates the word that wants to come to mind, but it doesn't feel right to me. As much as archaeology can reinforce that, yes, we see evidence of that, then that keeps happening. Is the Bible meant to be literal or metaphorical? Well, I think it was actually written to have components of both. And I think it makes it really confusing and really challenging at times. But it means, I think, that the Bible was written in a way to try and make sure that we as mortals can understand more of the complexity of God's existence and what God's looking for, and how he wants us to live. And so in some ways, some of those concepts are just so vast and so big that we have to write them in a metaphorical way. And in other ways, like he's trying to make connection and have us see, like, see how this has led to this, has led to this, it's led to this. So we see parts that are really, really literal and parts that are really metaphorical. And I think to interact with that just means you have to study your Bible more. You have to learn more. You have to keep investigating and praying and reading your Bible and reading other sources that can help you to understand and gain some insight as to what is attempted to be said there. And then keep praying to see, does what you're understanding feel true? Is the insight you're reading from other sources as well feel true? And then keep turning back to the Bible. So I hope this helps you. I hope that you have a great week, and thank you for being here.